Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah. Wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. So, is there more than one room? Are there people listening in another room? Like sisters or anything?
Yeah.
Okay, they're in here. If there's anyone in the hall, I don't know if I can be heard out there, but come to the musalla. Because we'll begin, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Thank you, everyone, for having me. So, raise your hand if you are under 18 years of age. Just put your hand up for me if you're under 18. Okay? Good, mashallah. All you put your hand down and look at me, please, very closely. If you just had your hand up, look at me very, very closely. Okay? So, all you guys, number one, thank you for being here. Number two, who am I and why should you listen to me? I'm going to explain that in a little bit. Number three, you do need to listen while you're in here. So I know it's not easy. I know it's a nice weather day in the summer. It's a Friday. You know, maybe there's some place you'd rather be. I understand that. But me, I'm a teacher. I've taught in public schools for 15 years. And I also teach teachers about teaching, if you can believe that. And I will let all of you know a little secret about teaching. When you teach, a good teacher is trained. They're taught that when they are speaking and kids start to talk, look up here, or kids stop paying attention, you're trained as a teacher to stop talking. You can't continue. Because there's no point in talking if the kids are not listening. And if the kids are talking, or if the kids are up and moving around, or if the kids are not looking at you as the teacher, then they're not listening. So if you don't do those things, if you're not paying attention, you're not listening to me, if you turn and talk to your friend next to you or anything like that, I have to stop. And then everything has to stop. And if that happens, don't feel bad or anything. It doesn't mean I'm mad at you. It's just what I have to do. And the reason I'm talking to you guys here today is because your parents care about you. You belong to a whole big community that cares about you. Even though I don't know you guys, I care about you because, like you, I'm a Muslim. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cares about you as well. And being Muslim is a really big responsibility. Being Muslim is a big life mission. And it's something that we have to take seriously. And it is something that you guys especially have to take seriously. Raise your hand if you know how to read and recite the Quran. Raise your hand. For those of you under 18, just raise your hand. Okay, good, mashallah. Put your hands down. I'd like someone to tell me, in the Quran, who does it tell the stories of? Whose stories are told in the Quran? The prophets. Good, mashallah. Exactly. What's your name? Zubair? Zubair. Jazakallah khair. Good, the prophets. Okay, so that book, you spend all this time, you learn to read and recite Arabic, mashallah. I'm sure you put lots of time in your life into it. Maybe time today, maybe time every weekend. Reciting that book. Alhamdulillah. You know it tells the stories of the prophets. Peace be upon all of them. Those prophets, peace be upon all of them, in those stories in the Quran, are they in lands of believers, lands of all other Muslims, or are they in lands of disbelievers? Which is it? Are they in lands of believers or lands of disbelievers? Disbelievers. Jazakallah khair. They are in lands of disbelievers. Us here today, as Muslims in the United States of America, 2024, are we in a land that is mostly believers, mostly Muslims, Or is it a land that is mostly disbelievers, mostly non-Muslims? Which is it? The land we live in today. It's mostly non-Muslims. Good. Jazakallah khair. So understand that those lives that the prophets lived, that Quran is speaking about. And maybe you haven't had a chance to read the Quran yet in a way that you can understand. But that time will come. You'll either learn Arabic well enough that you'll read it one day and you'll know it. Or you'll get a hold of a good English translation or a translation in another language you understand, and you'll understand its message one day. And you will read those stories. Those lives that the prophets lived, you have a chance to live a life like them. Because they had the message. The Quran, it is a message. It is the message to worship Allah alone and to follow the prophets. They had the message, and they had it in a land of disbelievers, and they brought that message to them. You guys have the chance for that. Raise your hands if your parents, or at least one of your parents, were not born in this country. Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Good. Put your hands down. Now, I'm sure if I were to ask most of you where your parents were born, you would tell me Somalia, or maybe Kenya, or maybe Ethiopia, maybe somewhere else. But wherever I asked, wherever they were born, if we were to ask the same question, were they in a land that was mostly Muslims, mostly non-Muslims? Most likely it'd be a place that was mostly Muslims. And certainly if it was Somalia, because Somalia is pretty much 100% Muslims. It's over 99% Muslims. And if you don't know, according to surveying that is done worldwide, did you know that Somalia is considered the most religious country in the world? In that it is the country where people are most likely to identify themselves as being either religious or very religious. Did you know that? There's a magazine called CEO World that is part of an organization that I believe is called the World Business Forum. Every 2 years, they survey 800,000 people worldwide. And every time about religion, about religiosity worldwide, and every time they do that survey, they find that Somalia is the most religious country in the world. Because 99.7% of people, which means 997 people out of 1,000 people in Somalia, will say that they are either religious or very religious. So your parents, guys, and your grandparents, this chance that you have to live the life of those prophets in the Quran, or a life like theirs, your parents did not have that chance. And your grandparents did not have that chance, and nor did your great-grandparents. They grew up in a land where everyone was Muslim, or most of the people were Muslim. Now I say that because I'm here to talk to you guys about school, and about being in school. Because your parents, they're not with you in school. And your parents, more than likely, they didn't go to school here. So they don't know what school is like here. Me, I grew up here. I went to school here. And I work in schools here. I know what goes on in schools. I know what kids are like in school. So it's difficult being a parent, raising kids in a land that you did not grow up in. It's difficult being a parent, having your kids go to school in a place and in a type of school that you didn't go to growing up, and in a culture that you didn't go to growing up. And I'm telling you, the most important thing you need to understand about school and being in school is what I just went over about how your life is similar to those prophets in the Quran. Because this land in the United States, mashallah, it has wealth. It has the attention of the world. It has power throughout the world. But it has a lot of problems too, you're going to find. And it has a lot of confusion. And when people come here from a different country, especially as adults, they immigrate from a different country, like most of your parents probably did. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. You're not familiar with the language, or if you are familiar with it, you might speak it with an accent. That makes you look different to people. You might just look different to people in general. It's a new culture. And usually when people come here from different countries, there was some important reason that they came. And usually that important reason has to do with money. Usually coming here means that you have the chance to get money that you could not get back home. And you maybe even need to help people back home who can't come here to get money. Why? Because if you don't know, the United States pretty much controls the money throughout the world. So in actually almost any country, you get to some point where if you want to start making more money, you usually have to come here. And that's what brings people here. So when your parents came here, they had to worry about that. They had to worry about setting up a home. They had to worry about just creating a masjid just so we could have a community. And they had to worry about figuring everything out just so you could get by here. You guys growing up here, you don't have all those same worries that your parents did. And the reality is, I'm sure if you learn about your parents' life history, you probably do not have the same challenges. But what you have is the opportunity to live the life that those prophets lived, or one like them. And what did they do? They called people to Islam. And they called people to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he left this life, how long ago? Over 1,400 years. And Islam spread to the east and the west. It spread to West Africa all the way to Morocco and Mauritania in West Africa. Spread all the way to the east to Indonesia, all the way to spread to the Atlantic Ocean on one end, to the Pacific Ocean on another end. It never got here. If you look in America's history and you look at world history, you will find that you are special people in a special time. Because you have the chance to bring the message of Islam to the people in this society, and no one who lived before you had that chance, like you have it today. It is a huge responsibility. It is a huge responsibility, but it's a beautiful mission. And I say this to kids, and I tell this to kids because you're not really going to get by in this society if you don't understand that. Because what you'll find when you go to school, and I've worked in schools with mostly Muslim kids here in Minnesota. I know how kids behave in school. I know what kids talk about in school. I know the language they use in school. The teachers there, they're not going to bring Islam into that school. Certainly the non-Muslim kids, they're not going to bring Islam into that school. And even amongst most of the Muslim kids, the ones who are not here on a day like today for something like this, they're probably not going to do it either. So what everyone's going to be talking about and everything that's going to be going on in school, it's going to be something that is just trying to make everyone forget about Islam and even forget about being Muslim. But that doesn't mean you're not Muslim when you go there. For those of you who just showed up, I was telling the kids before, number one, thank you for being here. Number two, who am I? I'll explain it to you guys who just came in a little bit. But something I need from you guys while I'm talking, just to sit quietly. Be listening. I know you might know someone here, or if you have friends here, it's tempting to want to talk to one another. But I can't talk if you are talking. So just be sure not to do that while you're sitting here, because then I get interrupted and I have to stop, and I don't want that to happen. Being young in America, when you're young in America, everyone is trying to take advantage of you. And the minds of young people are something that is an area of very, very close study. Okay, I studied it very closely being a teacher. But it is also studied very closely by people in the entertainment industry, meaning the people who make movies, people who make TV shows and video games, the people who make music, and the people who make TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and the other social media apps. They study the minds of young people very, very closely. Now, you might notice young people, you know how physical they are. Okay, like one of you guys, you could get up and start running around just like that. If I were to ask one of these guys here, for us, we'd be slow getting up. Okay, we're a lot more stiff. Okay, young people, they're very, very flexible. Older people, they're very, very stiff with their bodies. But the same is true in their mind, literally your brain. It's more flexible when you're young, and it gets more stiff when you're older. So young people, they actually find it easy to act one way in one place in a totally certain way, and then go to another place and they act in an entirely different way. Because their minds are actually more flexible and it's easier for them to do that. Old people, it's not like that. Old people, their minds literally, physically can't do that, so they're more attached to their habits. They're more attached to what they're used to. And what goes on with Muslim kids in America, certainly our Muslim kids here in Minnesota, is they grow up living two different lives almost. Because they have one way that they act when they're in school, one way when they act when they're around all those other kids, and they're talking about what everyone's talking about there, and then another way that they act around their parents, another way that they act in the masjid. And the problem with that is then when you get older, your mind can't do that switching anymore. And you have to choose to be one way or the other, and it's like it's not ready for it. And also, too, this chance that you have to bring Islam to people here, you won't have that chance if you live that way growing up. Because to really do that, to call people to Islam in this society, you have to follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. You have to study his life. You have to know his life. How old was he when he became a prophet? Does anyone know? When Jibril first gave him revelation, how old was he? My guy here, how old was he? 40, mashallah. Tabarakallah. What's your name? Huh? Khalid? Mashallah. May Allah bless you. Yeah, he was 40. So he didn't call people to the worship of Allah when he was young. He didn't do that. And when I talk about living the life that the prophets lived, and knowing you have the opportunity to do that here, it doesn't mean you go to school in August or you go out in the street tomorrow or whatever, you start calling people to Islam. That's not what it means. It's a lifelong project. But what the Prophet ﷺ did before Jibril came to him, before he received wahi, he earned the trust of people. And he earned the trust of people through his character. And he did that in two main ways. Two main ways. Number one, he was honest. Even if it was something against him, he was honest. He knew the truth mattered, and he always acted like the truth mattered. And that was why the Quraysh, the people he came from, what did they call him? Does anyone know the nickname they gave to him before he was a prophet? You want to know what they called him? They called him El-Amin, which means the trustworthy, because he was honest with people. So that's thing number one you need to focus on doing, is always being honest. A lot of times growing up, you will feel tempted to lie, especially when you get to age like 12, 13, 14. Kids at that age, they tend to be very, very dishonest. And parents should know that kids at that age, even a little older, a little younger, they tend to lie a lot. And they don't lie because they're evil, but they lie because they want to save people's impressions of them, and they're worried about what people are going to think. And when they go to school, they get all caught up in talking about things that they shouldn't be talking about, and then doing things that they shouldn't be doing. So they lie a lot. You know, kids these days, everyone likes to talk about how tough they are, and no one wants to look weak. And really, one of the biggest fitnas for the kids in our community going on right now is all the fighting that the kids do in school. And it's not just our kids, but our kids do it a lot. And there's this whole culture in school now, and outside of school, there's this whole culture of kids getting into fights, and they record on their phones, and they post it on TikTok, they post it on Snapchat especially. They post it on Instagram. There's whole Instagram channels devoted, channels on Twitter, TikTok, just to showing videos of kids fighting in school or close to it. And this is what all the kids are talking about. They all feel pressure to talk about. So even the kids who aren't doing that, they still feel pressure to talk about it. And they still feel pressure to know about it. So the kids, they all think that this fighting makes them tough. Does fighting make you tough? Does fighting make you strong? The Prophet ﷺ, he said, the strongest person is not the one who is best at fighting. He said the strongest person is the one who controls himself when he is angry. So school is always going to give you these choices, where what everyone's going to be talking about is something that takes you away from Islam. It's something that is going to make you forget about Islam, and more than likely it's going to be something that goes directly against Islam and what the Prophet ﷺ said, and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to do. And if you can't believe in your heart and your mind that you being in this place and this time in history is something special, then you will probably just fall into all that like everybody else does. And you'll get older, and you maybe will find that you do that so much that you even feel like being Muslim is hard. But if you can really take it into your heart and in your mind that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed, meaning Allah chose that you would be in this place, in this time in history, with an opportunity to call people to Islam like others did not have before you. If you have that, and you carry that with you then when you go to school, inshallah, you can overcome all the pressure of other kids and not partake in that. Because really being a good Muslim in school, it really starts within yourself, within your own heart and mind. And the reality of it is, it involves not doing what other kids do. It involves not speaking when other kids are all talking about this. It involves not going over there when everyone's looking at that and going somewhere else instead. And that's not easy. I know it's not easy. It will make you feel lonely. It will. That will be a trial. And when you do that, other kids will make you feel bad about it. They will call you strange. They will call you weird. They will make you feel like there's something wrong with you or there's something weak about you because you do that. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that Islam came as something strange. And he said it will come back as something strange. So give good news to the strangers. So you have to understand when you're in school and you make that choice, the choice that a strong person makes, the choice that a wise person makes, to not just do what everyone else is doing, and other people make you feel strange for that, that is showing you that you're on the right path. That is showing you that you are doing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has meant for you to do. And you'll find some of those people who call you strange at one time, or they make you feel some way about it at one time, they'll make you feel bad about it at one time. And it will feel bad. But if you stick to doing what you know is right, over time you'll find they come back to you. And you'll find that they want your advice. You'll find you get to a point in life where they're looking up to you. And when that happens, then you are in a position to speak to them in a way where they trust you. And that is the goal that you have to carry with yourself. And I encourage you guys to take that to heart, take that to mind. And to the parents, I understand, maybe we don't talk to the kids about this because of what I was saying before. Because we're all trying to get by. Parents are very busy. We have our jobs, we have everything. But you can't raise kids here without this understanding. Because otherwise, the kids, they will just experience Islam as a set of restrictions. They will just experience it as something that stops them from doing some things and makes them do other things that they maybe don't want to do. And there will always be something more fun than what Islam tells them to do that's tempting them. And there will always be the temptation to do haram things. Thank you. It will always be shown to them haram things being made to look fun. That will always happen. And if they don't have this sense that practicing Islam is part of this bigger mission in their life, then they won't really hold on to it. They'll just get frustrated with that and push back about it and rebel against it. It will begin with them trying to, do what they're not supposed to do in secret and hiding and lying about it. And they'll get to the point where they get more bold about it. And a lot of kids in our community, a lot of the young adult kids, they're at that point now. Because there's psychological reasons, and there's reasons concerning the makeup of the brain as to why young people, especially teenagers, they seek out thrill, they seek out fun, and they seek out excitement. Because their brains have a developmental need for the chemical dopamine. The development of the human brain from age 12 to 25 is more than any other point in the human's life, more so than from age 0 to 12. The brain becomes more interconnected, different parts of it mature. A key thing that happens with the development of the brain from age 12 to 25 is the nerves of the brain have a new coating put over it that is called myelin. And this process is called myelination. Myelin needs dopamine in order to form. So there's physiological reasons. Dopamine, how does the brain produce dopamine? It produces it when it's excited, when it experiences something new, and when it experiences something thrilling. So it's known in teenagers especially with their decision making, they want to seek out new experiences. They want to seek out thrilling experiences. And when they make decisions, they don't consider the risk when they make decisions enough. And they will do things that are dangerous or risky because they're seeking this dopamine. And all of the media and all the companies all trying to make money here in this country, they all take advantage of that. And that is why teenage culture in America is so toxic. Because it is all trying to take advantage of this psychological dynamic. So how do you get kids to make good decisions that involve self-discipline when you're up against this psychological dynamic? Those decisions have to feel like something powerful. It has to feel like something empowering to them. And if the religion is just, we don't do that because we're Muslims, or that's not what we do because That's not our culture. If it's just that, the kids won't experience that messaging as something empowering. They'll just experience that as, well, that's you, Mom, or that's you, Dad. And you know how individualistic the society is. I'm my own person. I can make my own decision. That's what the society always tells them. It's actually a terrible message to give kids. But it's what the society tells them. So they have to have an idea about Islam, if they're growing up in this society, that it is part of a larger mission in their life. And if that can be cultivated in them, then practicing the rules, following the commandments, that can feel like something empowering to them. And that is what they need to overcome this more than anything. So I encourage all you guys, because I know most of you probably recite the Quran, you recite it very well. Tell your parents, tell whoever you know you want to start learning more about what it says. And you want to start learning more about the life of the Prophet ﷺ. Because it is more important than what you learn in school. Okay, your parents have to send you to school 5 days a week. But learning about Islam and learning the life of the Prophet ﷺ and learning what the Quran tells you and its message, it is the most valuable thing on this earth. And I will tell you, guys, I'm Arab in my background. My father's grandparents were from Syria. But my father's a Christian. He's an Arab Christian. So I accepted Islam 18 years ago when I was in college. So I know the non-Muslims very, very well. They need Islam. I don't care how much wealth they have, how fancy cars they drive, how big their houses may be, whatever, how nice their schools might be. They are suffering. They are suffering as people and they're misguided. And no matter how you feel compared to them, because you have Islam, you have something to offer them that is the most valuable thing that they can have. And you have a responsibility to do it. And you need to think about that for your life. And you need to devote time to learning how to do it. And the way you do that is by getting knowledge in Islam from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So I say all this and I ask Allah for forgiveness. Anything good that I said comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anything wrong that I said comes from the deficiencies within myself. I bear witness that there's none worthy of worship but Allah alone. And I turn to Him in repentance. So if there's any questions, the kids are probably thinking about what I said. If there's any questions, or if you guys want me to talk about some of the specific topics related to the public schools and this type of thing, we can do that if someone has a question. Raise your hand for the parents if your kids go to Osseo public schools. Anyone? Osseo? Okay. Brooklyn Park. Anyone Brooklyn Park? You used to go to Brooklyn Park? Charter schools? Send their kids to charter schools? So, just a few things, because this was formed. I know people are concerned about Osseo with the LGBT stuff, and it is a concern. The LGBT concern in schools, it's the tip of the iceberg type of concern. Okay? There's a lot of things that have come before it. And parents need to make an effort to educate the schools about Islam and the kids' actual needs as Muslims and make them more aware. The good thing about public schools, they are open-minded to learning. And they're open-minded to diversity. And even though Osseo passed this policy about gender or whatever, and they have these things going on in schools, state law says that the curriculums in public schools have to be culturally relevant and relevant to the students' culture. And schools are active in trying to make it that way, but they make it that way according to what the community tells them about their culture. And because we don't have many people in education in our community, and because there's not enough initiatives set up to educate the public school system about that, they're just doing what other people tell them to do. So we have a responsibility towards the kids to educate their teachers about Islam. I wrote a book called Engaging Muslim Students in Public Schools. You can look it up on Amazon. I do trainings for teachers. I had a contract with Osseo last year. I've trained their equity department. I've trained the principal at Osseo Senior High School, principal of the middle school, and several other staff members there, all about Islam, about the beliefs, the sensitivities, what they need to do to pray. This is a huge thing in school, okay? The kids, they're supposed to be praying, by the time they're in middle school, certainly high school. The schools cannot accommodate the prayer if they don't know everything that it encompasses and all the rules in it. How wudu works, what the room should be like, how much time it actually takes. And, we have a lot of kids in our community. Okay, we have about 4 to 5 kids for every adult in our community here, as a Muslim community here in Minnesota. So that means 2 things. Number 1, it means that's social power that we have. Because these schools, if we took the kids out of them tomorrow, the schools would have massive budget cuts. They'd have to fire teachers. They'd probably have to close schools. So their jobs are dependent on us. So they owe us. That is social power that we have to leverage. Then they have state law telling them that they're supposed to learn about your culture and our culture and make the learning for the kids relevant to that. So, every other community is educating the public school system about themselves. We have to do the same thing. The LGBT stuff did not just show up overnight. That is part of a defined effort that goes back to the 1980s, really. If you look at some of the organizations that have really pushed into school, one of the main ones, there's an organization that's based in Washington, D.C. now, but it's called Human Rights Campaign, and they have a subdivision called Welcoming Schools, one of the main organizations that pushes these books and stuff in the schools. It started here in Minneapolis in the 1980s, is where it started, all the way back then. So we have to make that type of push because other communities have done it. But they don't have as many kids as we have. So economically, it actually makes more sense for the schools to listen to us. And I'm not saying to not go to the school board and complain about the policies and all that type of stuff. You should do that. We should do that. And if you don't know also, Osseo, actually all of the major public school districts in Minnesota, Osseo, Anoka, Minneapolis, St. Paul, those are the 4 biggest ones. You can throw in with them Burnsville, throw in with them Maplewood. All of those school districts, they have their school board elections in odd years. What does that mean? It means they don't have the elections for school board members during the presidential election or when the governor is elected. In odd years, the voter turnout is 90% less for those school board positions. Anoka-Hennepin is the biggest school district in Minnesota. Last year, the people who won the school board positions, they did it with about 1,000 votes. 1,000. If we just took the people in Juma, in the Masjid within the county, we could get those numbers of votes. So the community also needs to really think about, if you want to change these policies and stuff, you're going to have to change school board members at the end of the day. And you should really think about the elections, not this year, but in 2025. And we should run our own candidates. If as a Muslim community we can run and elect people in those school districts I named for school board, we can change these policies. We can pass policies that forbids the teachers from asking the kids their pronouns at the beginning of the year. It's probably the biggest area where the kids first, this stuff gets touched. That's a whole thing. Because you can get them to not teach, anything with LGBT stuff, you can opt them out of it. You can opt them out of it. You have a right by that by state law. But there's a few things that it's still hard to get away from, like the teachers asking the kids their pronouns at the beginning of the year. So we can educate them about how that's uncomfortable for us. But, if we get school board members elected, we can have policies around that changed. Another thing that you won't get around to is books in the libraries. Okay, because funding for the media centers in schools and the libraries, it comes from the state. And the state stipulates that it represents the diversity of the community, and it's explicit about including LGBT books. So any school, even a charter school that is 100% Muslim kids, run by a Muslim, even that school, if they have a library, they'll take state funds to do it, and the Department of Education will send someone to investigate the library, and if they don't find those books there, the school can get fined or be put under an audit or this type of thing. So the books being in the library, it's something that is very hard to get away from. The other thing, too, with the Biden administration, they have recently passed a directive for Title IX. Okay, Title IX is the law. It's part of federal law that gives funds to schools. It was originally to create equality in sports, essentially, between boys and girls. So girls could have the same sports opportunities as boys. And any school, which is basically all the schools in the country, that takes those funds, they have to abide by Title IX law. The Biden administration has said that Title IX, schools have to interpret it to mean that a boy means any student who says he or she is a boy. And a girl is any student that he or she says is a girl. So something that we should make sure of with the schools too. You should contact your kid's school principal in August, especially if you have a daughter, and make sure they have a bathroom in that school that is single use. Because the way the law is now, the schools are essentially restricted by the Biden administration from being able to say that a boy who says he's a girl can't go into the girl's bathroom. You understand what I'm saying? So that is something you should, so at the beginning of the school year, you should let the school know that you'd like to teach them more about Islam, and you can connect with me and we can do that. And I offer my programming to the schools. And the kids just need to see us doing that. Okay, because the kids experience Islam, they experience it as being Muslim as like something that's hidden away somewhere. You know, so we have it in the masjid, we have it at home, but when we go out to our jobs, we go out in the society, we're very timid about it. And I understand, and as I was explaining to them, you know, it's hard for parents to externalize it that way, but educating their teachers, if they know that you're making an effort to teach their teachers about Islam, that is part of the way that they can come to see it as being important and see it as something that they can externalize themselves. Okay? So that is what I will say on that. If we want to talk more about it next time, we can talk more about it next time. Any other questions?
So what is the best way you can tell to the schools to have our kids a single-use classroom?
I mean, you have to, like what I would do is just email the principal. Okay, it's always good to do stuff with written communication with schools. Okay, you do have rights as a parent. You have lots of rights as a parent in the United States. And when you do stuff in writing, you create a paper trail. So it's implicit when you do stuff in writing that if they violate your rights, you're going to have evidence that they did it or that you informed them correctly. Every parent should be contacting the principal of their kids' schools and asking if there's a single-use bathroom, which means a bathroom where you go into it and the door can lock and only one person can use it at the time. Because that right now is the only way that the girls can be guaranteed that a boy can't come into the bathroom. That is the only way. And there's nothing the school principal can do about it. Even the head of the Department of Education in Minnesota can't do anything about it, because right now it comes from the Biden administration. So you can't give, I mean, this is a thing too about principals, like sometimes people think, you know, the principal does lead a school, but really a principal, especially at a district school, they are more a conduit for implementing policies from the district and the state and the federal government in different situations. So like you can complain to the principal that you want it to be a girls-only bathroom. There's nothing the principal can do about it right now with the directive that they gave this spring. It was actually just like last month, I think, or in May. So you need to contact the principal. You need to let them know that you consider it a violation of your child's privacy rights. And and you want to say it's a violation of your right to direct the upbringing of your child, okay, this is the explicit constitutional right that parents have. It's established in the United States case law that every parent has the right to direct the upbringing of their child. You want to say that you consider it, I mean, at first we want to be like, you don't necessarily want to use legal language, but you want to let them know that you consider it, that your daughter has to be able to be alone in the bathroom if she needs to use the bathroom, or your son. And you want to make sure that exists. And if it doesn't exist, then you need to tell them that this needs to change, and that you're not sure if you can send your kid to the school. And, and it's okay to let them know that this is something the community is concerned about. Where do your kids go?
I told my kids live in Africa.
Yes, there's so many parents,
They go over here like this.
Yeah. And I mean, and look, that type of thing too. We need to collect data on that, okay? Because lots of parents have done that. The school districts need to know that they are losing kids to Africa, because there is $15,000 to $20,000 on the head of each kid. That's the average range of what is spent on one kid in a school district in Minnesota. So that kid leaves to Africa, it's $15,000 or $20,000. Minneapolis Public Schools are $25,000 that the school district lost. You get what I'm saying? So we need to know that and kind of collect some numbers on that and let people know about it. To kind of use the social leverage, I guess. Yes.
What are the requirements?
1 second, guys. You guys are doing a good job being patient, but I need you to be a little quiet. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to share something about what I said before when I was talking to you. And either I'm going to ask you to share it with someone sitting next to you or share it with me, but you don't know which I'm going to ask yet. Sorry, go ahead.
What do you need to do to become a member of the board?
Well, to be a school board member, you got to win an election. Okay? Yeah, I mean, I need to look into that a little more. Typically, to become a candidate is just filling out some paperwork. Usually what you need to become a candidate for school board is you have to have a residential address in the school district. That's usually the only qualification that exists. And then you file some paperwork to become a candidate, and then from there it's up to you to campaign, And I don't know if this masjid is part of Ayana's consortium. Is it? Okay, I've been talking to Sheikh Yusuf. I'm meeting with him again on Monday about some of these things, because we need to do a little bit more advanced analysis of this. Because, if you can really break it down, and the school board elections will work different ways, okay? Because you'll have the districts, and one seat might belong to this neighborhood. Another seat might belong to that neighborhood. But then there might be a seat that's for the whole district. You get what I'm saying? It's like open. So all those different dynamics are district by district, and you got to research it and look into it, But, we have a tighter knit community and a larger community than anyone does in this state right now. Okay, Americans are very individualized and separate from one another. So, we want to hold this community together through the generations. And you guys like being friends with one another so much. And it's beautiful that you get to grow up around one another. You got brothers, you got sisters, you got cousins, you got no shortage of friends. There's a lot of kids out there in this state, I will tell you, they're very, very lonely. They don't get to grow up with that. And if you don't hold on to the religion, this masjid is not going to be here by the time you're 30, 40, and you have your own kids. If you don't hold on to the religion. And then what you have right now with your friendship with one another, you'll find your kids don't have that. And then they're going to start suffering from depression and anxiety and all these types of things that American kids suffer from these days. You guys get what I'm saying? Okay? Good. But we need to leverage the community that we have right now. How old are you? 18? Yeah, I don't think there's not an age limit on running for school board, You live in Osseo? Brooklyn Park? Yeah, something to look into, and think in the community about who would be good for it, is my recommendation. Okay? Yes?
When it comes to policies,
Yeah.
how charter schools are different than public?
Yeah, good question. So charter schools, whether or not you should call a charter school a public school is kind of something you debate about, okay? Because charter school gets money from the state, so public funds pay for the school, but the school is not run by the government. It's run by citizens. A charter school is run by citizens who went through the application process to get a charter school. So a school district is always run under the authority of an elected school board, who are, when you're a school board member, in that role, you're a member of the government, okay? Charter schools, essentially, they are not run by the government, okay? They're run by citizens who went through the application process to run a charter school. To apply to start a charter school, all you need is a teaching license. You need one person in your application group who has a teaching license. That's the minimum qualifications to apply for a charter school. So lots of different people can do it. The process to get approved is kind of rigorous. So it's not always easy, this type of thing. So now charter schools under law, they have to meet the standards of the state of Minnesota for its curriculum. But the standards are a little different than content, okay? And the state, the state of Minnesota and most of the states, they don't really tell schools specifically what to teach. They tell them, like, these are the skills that the kids need to have at the end of each grade. So charter schools have that, but they do have more freedom when it comes to curriculum choice. They do have more of that. So a charter school that is directed by, someone who's Muslim who you trust, it should be that, they should have the control to control the curriculum a little bit more, okay? Now in a school district, the teachers all have a union. And the union contract always limits the control that the principal in a school can have over them. There's limits on how much the principal can observe their classroom. There's limits on how many minutes the principal can call them to a meeting. And there's limits on the extent to which they can direct them with the curriculum. And the district will put together a curriculum that the teachers will follow, but if they choose not to, there's actually not really an accountability mechanism for that. You understand what I'm saying? Now, sometimes, because that influences the culture of education in general, it can influence the culture of charter schools too. So sometimes a teacher's hired at a charter school, and they're kind of expecting they're going to have the independence like they would at any other school. Do you get what I'm saying, So sometimes the charter school administrators, they're maybe timid to say, hey, don't teach this stuff to their kids or whatever, but they do have more authority to do that than they do in the district schools. Charter schools, funding in schools comes from the states. The state government for every kid gives a certain amount. And then the district schools, they will also get money from property taxes, and they get a lot from that. And then there's different initiatives where you get money from the federal government. Charter school, most cities do not give property tax funds to charter schools, most of them. So the charter schools are almost always less funded than the district schools because of that. And also, too, the districts, because the buildings are on city property, they own the property of the schools, whereas charter schools actually have to be renting the property. They're not allowed to buy properties in the state of Minnesota. So charter schools almost always have less money for facilities and for salaries. It's not uncommon that the teachers in charter schools are younger teachers who are newer, who wouldn't demand as high a salary on the pay scale in the districts. So it's very common that teacher retention is not the same in charter schools. Charter schools are turning teachers over more, whereas in the districts, they're more likely to stay. I mean, I did that. My first 3 years of teaching, my first 3 years were in Saudi, but my first 3 years here were in charter school. And then once I got my license, then I moved on to Minneapolis Public Schools because, that's a common teaching path, So those are kind of the differences. Yeah. But like I was saying, there is like this Title IX thing. The charter schools get Title IX funds. So that initiative from the Biden administration, they are technically supposed to follow that, too. Okay, the thing I was saying with the library books, the charter schools are supposed to follow that. And if they don't, they risk some consequences and that type of stuff. So with all the schools, there's a certain amount of things out of the people's hands, even the people who run the building. You know, and some of that stuff. There are some states that have said that they're not going to follow the Biden administration's initiative, but they're all southern states. I think it's Oklahoma, Mississippi, Texas, and I think Alabama. You know, their attorney generals said that it was unconstitutional for the Biden administration to do that. And they will challenge it in the courts, and it might get struck down over time. Keith Ellison could do the same thing here, but I don't think he's going to. But someone who knows him well should maybe think about trying to convince him, you know. And you know, same with the school board elections. You know, we need to break down the elections for the state representatives and that type of stuff, because there is significant voting power in the community. So, any other questions? You guys have questions? Next time I'm here, I want you to think of a question.
I know private schools don't get any money from the government, but
Yeah.
is there a way they can do?
Yeah, actually, they do get some. They can get some money. Also, if I meant to mention, I don't know if you guys know Asufa Academy, which is in Blaine. I'm going to be working with them regularly this next year. I'm going to be in the school like on a weekly basis, and I'm going to be training their teachers, and I'm helping the admin, all that type of stuff. So I'm getting very closely involved in that school. They are planning an expansion, and they are taking students right now, if anyone's interested in that. And they're generally pretty affordable, just so you know. That's the thing to know. Private schools actually can get some money from the federal government. In 1965, there was a law passed called the Elementary and Secondary Schools Act. That law gets renewed every 2 years, and it provides funds to schools for different initiatives. So a school that has kids who are like low income or like free and reduced lunch, even a private school can get money from that law for teachers from them. Not like to pay all the teachers, but they get some money for it. They get some money for professional development for it. If kids are ESL, English as a second language, or they qualify for that, they get some funds for that. So they can get some funds for that. You know, in Minnesota, trying to get the governments to fund private schools more is something we really need in our community. We really need. And again, this is something I'm just trying to talk with Ayana a little bit about. You know, we really need to use our political leverage for this. You know, some people from the Republican Party here in Minnesota, they've reached out to me because they know that our community wants school choice. They know that we are against these LGBT initiatives and stuff. And they have actually done some polling, and they have found that in the state of Minnesota, school vouchers, where the state money goes to the parent, and then the parent can choose whatever school to send it to, including a private school, even amongst Democrats in that state, it has support 70% of people. So the school choice people here, who are mostly Republican people, they actually think even with the Democrats ruling everything, that an initiative like that could get passed. But they think that they need the help of us to do it. You get what I'm saying? Because they think the Democrats will listen to us more, which they will, you know. And there is 4 Somali states Congress members now. You know, the Democratic Party was trying to change Minnesota human rights law. They actually did change human rights law in Minnesota, to include gender identity as a protected class, like race and religion and all this type of stuff. Now, in Minnesota human rights law, they have sexual orientation there too, but it explicitly says that religious organizations are exempt from following that. So, like a masjid hiring someone to work there, they can discriminate against someone for being gay or something like this. But when they added gender identity to it recently, they did not put that same exception for religious institutions. And Sheikh Yusuf with Ayana, he spoke to the Congress against it, and a bunch of other religious leaders. And my understanding of what took place, actually, the 4 Somali members of the Democratic Party who are in the Congress, they told the Democrats to change this, because otherwise they're going to get a backlash from our community. And they did change it. You get what I'm saying? So even those members who are from the community, but they're with the Democrats, even they have some power in there, and we shouldn't take it for granted. You know, the community, we have numbers. That's the thing our community has. We have numbers, and we have significant voting power. You know, the Mormons run Utah. Okay, the Somalis, you could take over Minnesota. You really could. You know, Minnesotans, white Minnesotans, they have a tradition of letting other people take over their politics. They don't like to be in politics and stuff. They're like very passive people. You know, that's why the mayor of Minneapolis, he's not from there. He's a Jew from Virginia. You know, Al Franken becoming the former senator here. He's not like a traditional white. They let other people take over their politics. You get what I'm saying? We could do the same thing here. We really could. They would let it happen. So that's part of how we have to think about long term. And you guys should understand that. You can rule this state one day if you want to. But you have to be good. Any other questions?
Did you teach a new certification? Like if I want to be a teacher? Even though I have a teaching background.
You have a degree?
In Somalia.
You have a degree in Somalia?
Yeah, I get a master's.
I mean, if you have a bachelor's degree in Somalia, if you could get it transferred here, if you have a bachelor's degree, getting a teaching certification in a certain field takes about 18 months. If you're to attend classes full time for 18 months, you could do it. Now, there is a way to get a teaching job without getting a license in Minnesota. If a school is hiring for a teaching job and they want a qualification for the person they're going to hire, and they do not have someone apply for the job that has that qualification and a teaching license. You understand what I'm saying? So like in the charter schools, and actually in Minneapolis public schools, a lot of the teachers who teach Somali, they're hired this way. Okay, like if you're going to have a Somali class in a school, you want someone who knows Somali. If you don't have a licensed person who applies for the job, then you can hire someone who's not licensed. But that person is also supposed to be registered in a certification course at a university, basically. Do you know what I'm saying? So I got a job at a charter school that way. When I worked at a charter school, it was before I had a teaching license. But they wanted someone who spoke Spanish, and I speak Spanish. So I got that job, and for 3 years I worked there while I was doing my teaching license. So there is ways that can be done. So you can apply for jobs without a teaching license. It's more likely to get hired that way in charter schools than it is in district schools, because the union has a little tighter control over that in the districts. But yeah, if you have a degree, though, it takes about 18 months of postgraduate classes. Okay? Okay, guys, I want you, whoa, sit. Okay? I want each one of you, I want you to pair up. Okay, maybe you've been in school, they do like a think, pair, share. You know what I'm talking about? Like you're in class, they tell you to partner up. I want you to share with one another what you thought the most important thing that I said was. Okay? See this guy, he's going to do it, okay? Go ahead, turn towards one another. Okay, you can say it quietly, we're not going to listen in. I want you to turn towards one another, yep. And say, girls, I want you to do it too, please, in the back. Okay? Okay, I want you to find a partner and share one thing. What was I know I've been talking to the parents for a little bit, but when I was talking to you guys, what was the most important thing that I said? Okay, I want you to share that with one another. And if your friend is having trouble thinking, help them think, okay? Any other questions? I'm not sure I need this so much. Any other questions? Parents.
So
I was moving up and down myself.
Yes.
What are the ability of the parents towards the public school?
Well, look.
What powers do they have to involve?
Well, look, something you got to understand, in America, public schools in their origin, they are local first, okay? And traditionally, parental participation in the public school system is really expected in American schools. You know, like, it's expected that people are going to advocate for this and that. So, within the public schools, yeah, thank you for sharing this. I asked if you guys can stop now. In the public schools, you know, you get what you push for, basically. You know, the biggest thing the community has going for us is the amount of kids that we have. So the schools have to be responsive to us. Now look, like, as I said before, I wrote a book for non-Muslim teachers and principals to explain to them everything about being Muslim in America and everything about their religion and what you need to know to respect it and how to actually reinforce it in a way that's appropriate in a public school. And I've trained over 2,000 teachers in the Twin Cities alone on this program. You can look up abrahameducation.com. So if you guys, you know, the biggest thing we can do is educate the people in the public school system about what we want for the kids. That's not easy for parents to do. So I'll do it for you. Or we can give it to them online, because this is what other communities have done. This is certainly what the LGBT community has done. African Americans, if you look it up, you will find books about teaching African American kids. You'll find books about teaching Latino kids, all these types of things. Every community, you know, Jewish people. Okay, if you look at the curriculum of schools in America, they are constantly reading books about World War II, about the Holocaust, about the experience of Jewish immigrants, and other books by Jewish authors. That did not just happen by accident overnight. When Jewish immigrants came here, they were active about educating the public school system about the experience of the Holocaust and all that type of stuff, and saying to them, hey, here's this book. You should use this book in class. You don't know how to teach it? We'll teach you how to teach it. A few years ago, I was negotiating a contract with Fairfax County Public Schools in Virginia. Has 180,000 students. It's one of the largest school districts in America. I was negotiating a contract with their language arts department. They told me that every year for 50 years, they have sent teachers to a synagogue in Fairfax County, not to learn about Jewish culture and stuff, but to have people at the synagogue teach the teachers about implementing language arts curriculum. You understand what I'm saying? They've done this for a long time. So, the lady I was talking to in that department, for her, it just made logical sense that the Muslim community would do the same thing. You understand what I'm saying? So, we have a lot of, the public school system, it is one of the places where we have the most political power and leverage. Okay, we don't have all that much money in our community. But we have lots of kids. We have lots of kids. And that means money to the people in the public schools. And, with all the immigration that the country's experienced over the last 20 years, the public school people, they know they need to learn about other cultures. And they are told they have to learn that in their profession. And just in the society in general, how are we going to teach the society better about Islam? Because the people who learn about Islam now, it's all people who have a personal interest in it. Either they're curious about religion for whatever reason, or they are Islamophobic and they hate Islam and they want to refute it or something like that. Those are the people who seek out knowledge about Islam amongst the non-Muslims. People in the public education system, they don't have a personal interest in learning about it, but they have a professional interest in learning about it. Because the more you know about the background of your students, the better you can teach them. That is something that is proven scientifically in the field of education. And the profession tells them to do that. When you get a teaching license in Minnesota, you have to do 150 hours of professional development within 5 years to get your license renewed. At minimum, 8 of those hours have to be in multiculturalism. 2 years ago, the Department of Education put as a subcategory under multiculturalism religion. So teachers are actually specifically told that they need to learn about religious diversity as part of their continuing education to get relicensed. And that's why my program, like I offer training, it's 8 hours long, they can do online. I have teachers here, they just do that training, learn all about Muslim kids, teach them all about their religion, all the practices. I even teach them what Duxi is like. And that's actually something that's really important for teachers to know about. This is a whole thing that has actually the kids fight against. Because the kids, when they attend Duxi, they learn about learning one way. And they learn about reading a certain way. And that develops certain habits in them. If the teachers in the schools know what that learning is like, then they can build on that. If they don't know about it, then they will teach in a way that clashes against it and it becomes more difficult for the kids. And they've actually done that for a long time. And the achievement of the kids in school has suffered because of it. And, the way that you learn Arabic, and it's actually a good way to learn reading. And there's actually research that validates that the field of education could actually benefit from. So all this type of stuff. And I give the teachers books that Muslims have wrote that are appropriate for public schools, that can be used from preschool to 12th grade, that feature Muslim people and give an authentic representation to the religion, all that type of stuff, so they can at least see that in school. So, honestly, that's the biggest thing that we can do for the kids. And like I said, the kids need to see the parents trying to externalize Islam to the non-Muslims more. And it's not easy, but the kids are used to seeing the parents, we act one way and speak one way at home, and when we're amongst Muslims, then we're around the non-Muslims, we speak another way. And they see, well, the parents have their way of doing that, so us as kids, we can have our way of doing that. You understand what I'm saying? And then it's all open for interpretation. The difficulty that you go through with that, you should talk to your kid about that so they can appreciate where you're coming from. But they need to see us making an effort for that. And again, the nice thing, too, about professional development in education, you can educate people in a comprehensive way. You have them sit down and they listen to a prepared presentation for a few hours. So that way you can learn about Islam in a way where things are put in its proper place. You understand? Because the way it always happens now, you don't talk about religion in society amongst people generally. So when does it come up? It comes up when, Israel starts bombing Palestine, and then people want to know about that. It comes up when the LGBT stuff comes up, and we're not happy. It only comes up when there's a conflict. You understand what I'm saying? And it's not really a good way to educate people about it. We need to try to make efforts to educate people in the society about Islam so they understand those conflicts in their proper context when they come up. And they understand that there's a whole lot more. And actually, too, people come to learn that we are sacrificing a lot. When I do training with teachers, I show them the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. First, I explain to them what the hadith are. And I show them the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he says, on Yom al-Qiyamah, the first thing the servant will be asked about is his salah. And if it is sound, he will be saved. And if it is deficient, he will be lost. And I explain what that means for your place in the afterlife. And then I introduce what it takes to pray. And they come, because most of the kids aren't praying in school. Even if they're 16, 17 years old, most of them are not praying in school. If you have a public high school, you have 100 Muslim kids in it, there's probably 9 or 10 of them who are praying, to be honest. But the reason for that, part of the reason for that is to do it, you have to really want it as a kid, because the school does not make it easy. Because they don't know how to accommodate it unless they know everything entailed in it. And we need their help, because they need to supervise the kids when they do it. Because if you take 20, 25, 13, 14, 15-year-olds, you say, okay, it's time to pray, you guys can go use the gym or whatever, you got 15 minutes, they're not going to go pray when they go in that gym, they're going to start horsing around and goofing off. They don't have the impulse control to actually do it. And I don't know anywhere in the Muslim world, you don't just leave kids to do the prayer by themselves. There's always an adult leading it. So a lot of times the people in the school, they don't even know that it's like okay for them. They have to supervise it. The kids have to be supervised with stuff. And the teachers need to know what it's supposed to look like. They need to know the whole process. So that way if the kids start goofing off and aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, they can redirect them. And we have to let the kids know, that the teachers know what it's all about and all that type of stuff. Because the kids right now, they're using the prayer breaks as a way to hoodwink the teachers and to go goof off this type of stuff. And then the teachers themselves like, oh, it's not, those kids don't really take their religion seriously and all this type of thing. It just goes downhill. But the kids aren't being set up for success with it. Talking about this whole stuff with bathrooms too. Like teaching them about our specific habits as Muslims in the bathroom and having to make wudu. Because they're like, oh, these poor transsexual kids, they've been sacrificing so much in the bathroom. Our kids are sacrificing a lot in the bathroom. The bathrooms at the schools are not set up to wash yourself with water when you use a bathroom. It's usually expected that the boys are going to urinate standing up. That's something that we've sacrificed and the kids have sacrificed. The schools need to know that all this stuff we're sacrificing, and it hurts us. It hurts us mentally, it hurts us psychologically. The kids develop guilt complexes because of it. And that's why we have these young adults in our community now who are 20 to 30, and they're all complaining about their mental health crises and this type of stuff because they've had these guilt complexes developed from young ages, this type of thing. Yes? Yeah. We can take a break. We can be done now. Inshallah. If anyone would like to, continue talking, we can continue after. Okay, guys. It's snack time. Okay? The moment you've been waiting for. Don't go crazy out there, though, okay? Bismillah. Okay, if I can be heard outside the musalla, you should bring your break to an end, inshallah. If you're drinking something or eating something, finish it up. Make your way back to the musalla. Inshallah. Bismillah. Is soda allowed in the musalla? Don't spill it. Because if it's allowed now and you spill that, it won't be allowed anymore and you'll ruin it for everybody. I don't want to see that happen, So guys, what I was saying before to the young guys, especially those of you in high school, if you were here before, I was talking about the minds of people your age and how closely it's studied. So the whole, the thing about teenagers, the way that everyone acts, they all think they're doing something original. But they're actually acting like clowns exactly like someone wants them to act. And their minds have been tricked into that. And the entertainment industry, and specifically the music, well, actually all of it, but especially the music industry, and to be even more specific, especially the rap music industry, all of that exists as a way to brainwash young people into being clowns and losers. That is what it is, intentionally. And if you look into the people who started it, and the people who really benefited from it, and make money off of all that foolishness, they knew that. And it was especially meant to target black people especially. So someone who looks at rap music and rap videos, or someone doing all that, and they imitate that behavior, they're being the biggest fool on earth, and they think they're being cool. So don't be a fool. And you see someone else being a fool, if you try and tell them that they're being a fool, they might not listen to you. but at least keep yourself from that behavior. And just by that, you're doing them a favor. And don't give the whole thing attention, okay? Since we're beginning here, okay, what I was saying before, some of you might not have been in the room, but what I was saying before about not talking, make sure you're sticking to that, please, okay? So what topic did you guys want me to get into at this junction? Was there another question, something else to talk about specifically that someone had? Parents or children or otherwise, so you can benefit from the time. Specific about parents' rights, because I was asked about that. Excuse me. If you've been involved with the OSCEO parents, which maybe not all of you have, you might know. In the United States of America, parents have a general right to control and direct the upbringing of their child. That is a general right that you have in the United States. That right was established by the Supreme Court in the year 1925 in a ruling in a case in the state of Oregon. In 1925, actually a few years before that, the state of Oregon actually tried to ban homeschooling and private school in the 1920s. They passed a law saying every kid has to go to the public schools. And that law was challenged by the Catholic Church, who had, of course, a lot of private schools, as they do all over the country. And the Catholic Church won in the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said states cannot force parents to send their kid to public school, and parents have a general right to direct the education and upbringing of their children. Now, what that means, once you choose to send your kid to public school, what that means as far as how much control you have over directing their upbringing per se while they are in school, that is a matter of debate. That is a matter of legal debates, and it is not something that is completely played out in United States law. Because most law like that pertains to rights, the details of it are ironed out through the court system. So you have that general right. Now, in Minnesota, Minnesota is one of 9 states that has an explicit law that says parents have the right to review the learning curriculum of their child. The entire thing, not just about any specific subject, but they have a right to know ahead of time what their kids are going to learn. And the school districts are actually supposed to have a process in place for parents to be able to review their child's learning curriculum. Now, what that process is, that is another thing that you have to ask the school district about explicitly. Because it might be that they have some presentations set up throughout the year, and you have to attend those. It might be that, actually it's not uncommon that the schools, even though by law they're supposed to have that process in place, they do not always have it in place. Because I've actually learned in education, it's not uncommon for people in education to not be well educated in what the law says about education, because they don't really teach you about it in teacher training. MashaAllah, this guy's he's cute. The rest of you are doing a good job listening. What that law also says about reviewing your child's learning curriculum, it also says, it says anything a parent objects to, objecting meaning they don't want it, anything a parent objects to, they have a right for their kid to receive alternative instruction to that. That says alternative instruction and not opt out because it might be that you have a case in high school where you can't have a kid like miss a full unit or something like that because they need to get a certain credit to graduate. But if that's the case, if they're going to do this unit or something, you don't want them to do that, the school has to create a chance for the kid to do something else that earns them the same credit, basically. Before high school, schools usually don't mind if you just opt the kid out of whatever learning you don't want, because before high school, the learning is not really tied to credits. So, hey guys, I'm going to ask if you can keep the phones put away, please. Okay, I know we're in the habit of checking them regularly. I understand that type of thing. But I get distracted easily. I was talking about listening, and me, because I'm a teacher, I'm trained to talk to people a certain way. So if I see you get distracted, then I have to stop. So if you can have the phones put away. And it's something actually, this whole issue has been on my mind as well, because a lot of the kids too, for the adults, we have to be very mindful during Juma, because I'm seeing more and more, I'm talking about adults bringing the phones out and checking stuff during Juma. And I'm not a faqih, but I do believe there is a fiqh basis to say that nullifies your Juma if you do something like that, because you stop paying attention. And for the kids, they will constantly be seeing the parents on the phones during Juma and stuff, and a lot of the kids, they're kind of not realizing the proper etiquette of the masjid, that type of thing. Okay? So, this right in Minnesota that you have to review the curriculum and receive alternative instruction, it's a powerful thing that we can leverage. Parents at Osseo Senior High School did that last year. They were doing some unit in April or something, LGBT, transgender stuff or something like that. I think most of the Muslim parents in the school, if my understanding is correct, or at least a whole lot of them, they asserted this right with the school, and the school had to set up something else for the kids to do that day. If you're going to set up that right, or if you're going to assert that, when it comes to learning about what the kid's going to learn, the main subject area that you want to learn about is what the kid's going to learn in language arts class, which is sometimes called a reading class. Because that is where usually the type of learning that parents are sensitive about and that they don't want the kids exposed to is happening. If the school is going to read some book or something like this that you don't want the kid to be a part of, what works best is if you arrange with the school for the kid to not be in school that day. Because for the kids, it becomes kind of an awkward situation if everyone's going to learn something and then they become the one kid or the few kids who are told, you got to go somewhere else. Other kids are going to ask them about that. Other kids are going to tease them about it. And it can make them feel uncomfortable. And like I was saying before, we have to teach the kids to learn to deal with being uncomfortable, because being a Muslim means that you're strange to a certain extent if you practice Islam. But sometimes what parents experience is when you have the kid opt out of something, they get this peer pressure about it, and then they end up coming back to the parents like, well, what's the big deal, mom and dad, blah, 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 all that type of thing. You don't want to deal with that with the kids. Okay? Any other questions about the kids? School, parents, community in general.
So sometimes parents are so worried about when kids miss school or for certain religious purpose.
Right. Okay, really good question. Okay, so missing school. So there is educational neglect laws in Minnesota. And it is the case that if your kid misses school for a certain amount or in certain ways, that you if the kid misses school for a certain amount of time, you could trigger the school flagging that kid for being a victim of educational neglect. What exactly that is can change from school district to school district, but usually It's typically the case that if a kid misses a few days of school in a row and the school has not been notified why, they might refer it to the school social worker. And then the school social worker will call the family and try to look into it. It's commonly the case that if a kid misses 2 weeks of school in a row, 2 consecutive weeks, they are likely to, if it's consecutive, they might be dropped from the school roster if they haven't heard from the parents why. It's commonly the case in high school that if a kid misses 10 days, 9 or 10 days within 1 quarter, that they cannot receive full credit for their classes within that quarter. And that includes if the kid skips class or this type of thing. It's not always the case. It changes from district to district. Okay? Now, in Minnesota, there is a law that stipulates that parents can have their kids out of school for 3 hours a week to receive religious education at a religious institution, and those 3 hours will not go against their attendance record, it will not go against their credits or anything. They will still have to make up the work that they missed during that time, but it's not something that can be struck against them. 3 hours a week, total. And that's like total. So you have 40 hours in 40 weeks in a school year, 3 hours a week, you're talking about 120 hours in a year. Okay? But the general guideline is 3 hours a week. And all the parent has to do is inform the school that they're going to be missing school at this time for religious education. Now, you can certainly use that to take the kids out of school early every Friday for Juma. So the kid can leave at 12 or 11:30 every Friday if you want. Still got to make up what he misses, but you can use that law for that. I think that something is a little bit more of a broad topic, but you could set up educational programming in the masjid, like close to when school ends. And you could, 3 hours a week, okay, over 5 days, that's, 180 minutes divided by 5, that's what, 36 minutes, okay? So you could have the kid leave school a half hour early every day from school. And they come to the masjid and they start taking classes at the masjid for an hour, 2 hours every day. I actually think that would be a good way for us to do religious education instead of cramming the kids into the schools on the weekend, because the kids get frustrated with that. The kids get very frustrated with being in Duxie 4 or 5, 6 hours, however many hours on Saturday and Sunday. And they grow up feeling like they're losing their weekends. I've had kids when they get older in high school talk to me realizing that they go through something where maybe in Duxie the teachers are more strict, or they don't want to disappoint those teachers as much because they're closer to them. So they get to school on Monday and they feel like at school on Monday they can let loose a little bit because they don't care about the consequences there as much as they do in Duxie. You get what I'm saying? And sometimes the kids start experiencing behavior problems because of that. I was in New York in May. I was in Long Island, and I talked to this masjid that's mostly a Bengali community. The director of the masjid is his brother, who's about 34, 35. And he did a degree in Islam in Bangladesh. And then after that, him and his family spent years traveling to Sri Lanka, South Africa, and the UK, studying Muslim communities growing up as minorities in societies. And they said they found consistently communities where they were educating the kids with Islamic classes after school, Monday through Friday. The kids were turning out better than places where they were doing the education on the weekend. Because on Monday through Friday, when the kids get out of school, usually that time right after school, they just go home and waste it anyway. They're already in a little bit of a learning mode because they've been at school. And they're not feeling like their weekends are being taken away as they grow up. Sometimes the kids, they become resentful towards Duxie and therefore resentful towards their Islamic education and maybe even eventually resentful towards Islam itself by having to go through that over the years. So that's the whole thing. I know it's a longer project, it's a whole thing to think about, there's all kinds of things that go into it, but that's the whole thing. But for 3 hours a week, you can take the kids out of school. You know, you can take the kids out, of course, for any religious holiday. Those are excused absences. The schools are getting more and more open to making Eid a holiday on the school calendar. Just the difficult thing about it is when school districts put their calendars together, they usually do it 3, 4, or 5 years out. So they will make, so like this year, 2024, they will make the calendar for 2027 in a way. So then they want to know when Eid is going to be in 2027. And you can't really tell them because of the moon and this type of stuff. So, but you can always take Eid off and holidays. And even Jummah. You have a right to take the kids out of school for Jummah. You have a right to do that. The kids, of course, they have a right to pray in school. They have a right to hold Jummah in school. That's a right under the Freedom of Expression Clause of the First Amendment. But there is a stipulation in United States case law that a religious rights can be taken away if it is deemed to be disruptive to the learning environment. And what happens a lot in our schools here is these guys gather together and they say, okay, you can pray at 12:30 or whatever, and they give them a room somewhere to pray, and then they get out in the halls and they get down to the hall or whatever, and they just goof off and they don't actually pray. And not one of them can be a strong enough leader to be like, hey guys, let's get it done. Because you need that strong leadership. But it's difficult for them. Young people have a hard time controlling their impulses when they're given a little bit of freedom. So most, like I said, most Muslim kids in middle and high school in our state, and I'd say probably in the country, most of them are not praying at school. And it's not necessarily they don't want to be, but it needs to be set up well by the school. And if the school doesn't set it up well, then the kids end up goofing off and this is downward spiral happens. So the schools really need to be educated on what they have to do to accommodate. And I'll tell you, the biggest thing with accommodating prayer in school, for the schools, is not the prayer itself, it's accommodating wudu. Because the bathrooms are not built to do wudu. So if you have 10 boys who are going to pray, and they say, okay, go to the library, you can do it there. You know, they all have to go to the bathroom first. If there's one sink in the bathroom, they all have to do wudu. How long is it going to take for 10 of them to do wudu? It'll take them 20 minutes. And then they're only given 10 minutes to pray. And they will take their break, you know, because who doesn't want to break from class? But then they know, like, they're not really going to be able to do wudu. It doesn't really work out, so then they just end up goofing off. Like, these types of problems have been so common in our schools here in the Twin Cities. And you know, the kids, for their part, they might go home, mom and dad ask, did you pray at school? Say, yeah, I prayed at school, you know, and they'll lie about it because teenagers lie a lot. Not because they're bad, but because they don't want people to have bad impressions of them. And they do things that are wrong or they don't meet their responsibilities because of a lack of impulse control. So, you know, we have to try to start do what we can to make it easier for the kids. You know, it needs to be made easier for the kids, and there's no getting around that we have to educate the schools about the accommodations that they need. And there's even more things than that too, I'll tell you. You know, many of the things they learn about, the habits that some of the teachers have of talking to the kids and stuff, like, it's not exactly Islamic. That's a little bit to explain, but I explained in my book.
What about the homeschool?
Huh?
Homeschool.
What about homeschooling?
Yeah.
Well, so in the United States, you always have a right to homeschool. That's part of that right that was established in 1925. To homeschool in Minnesota, each state has different laws on homeschooling. In Minnesota, you have to notify the local school district that they are homeschooling. In Minnesota, the kid is still supposed to take standardized tests if they are homeschooling. And if you homeschool your kid, the school district still has to make them available to the kid. Okay, so like in April, the kids usually take the MCAs. That's what the standardized tests are called in Minnesota. So if you live in Brooklyn Park School District or Osseo or something, and you homeschool your kid, Osseo still has to let your kid come to the district center or come somewhere to take the standardized tests in April when it comes around. And now you can get your own tests and set it up for the kids. You can do it yourself. A lot of times it works easier to just do it through the school district because they have it set up already. And there's not really, if you homeschool your kid in Minnesota, you're technically supposed to still teach them the learning standards of the education in Minnesota. You can do it in kind of a flexible way, but you're still supposed to do it. Now, how do they check up on that? The way they check up on that is through random audits. So it's like taxes. You file your taxes, and they pick people at random to audit, or there might be someone to flag to audit. With homeschooling, you don't actually have to submit anything to the government, but they know through the local school districts that you are homeschooling your kid. And they might pick you at random to be audited. If you get audited, you essentially have to have documentation that shows what you're teaching and that you're schooling the kid. You get what I'm saying? It's kind of loose. From what I know from talking to people who homeschool, it's pretty rare to get audited if you homeschool in Minnesota. It's not what the Department of Education is really occupying themselves with. However, if there were to suddenly be a bunch more families doing it, they probably would. And if it came from our community, they would probably do it even more because that tends to be how the state interacts with this community. They tend to, once we start doing something, they tend to look more closely at it for whatever reason. So that's essentially how homeschooling works. You have to notify the school districts, which the law says you have to write a letter to the superintendent, letting them know that, which can be an email, letting them know you're going to homeschool your kid. Many of the school districts, they will give you a curriculum to teach the kids if you want, if you're homeschooling. Most of them do that, and some of them, they will do that online too. They'll give you online programming, or they'll give you packets and stuff. That's not uncommon at all. They'll still do that. But is that necessarily what you want to do for homeschool? Maybe, maybe not. So you have the right to homeschool. It will never be taken away. And if you do it, you want to be good at record keeping. Yeah, so, like that 2-week thing, okay? Like if the kid is not residing... to be honest, actually, what I've known to take place, if the family still has a residence in Minnesota, is still holding a residence, honestly, a lot of the schools will work with you these days if the kid goes to Africa, has been my experience from what I've seen, actually. I certainly know smaller schools more willing to do that. The school I was at in Minneapolis Public Schools, it was the principal's decision there, but he did that. Like families, if they had a residence here, he would let them do online stuff or keep up with the classes online and still be students in the classes. But you have to still have an address here in Minnesota. But it really kind of depends from school to school. However, from what I was saying before, you have to understand, schools do not want to lose kids. No principal wants the amount of kids they have enrolled in the school to decrease from one year to the next, because it means budget cuts if it does. So a lot of times, the principal, they might try to accommodate it more than you think. So if you go to the school and you tell them that the kid's going to be in Africa, but we still have a residence here, we'd like for him to still, be doing schooling through here, what can you do? You might be surprised, And especially because most classes, too, have a Google Classroom these days, so the work is posted through there, so it is available through that. They might not get the instruction, but it is available through that. So, if you lose a Minnesota address, a kid needs a Minnesota address, or they need to be registered as homeless in Minnesota to be a student in the Minnesota school. But so long as they have an address, or they're registered as homeless at the shelter somewhere, they will be, you can be a student in the school in Minnesota, So that 2-week policy, it honestly depends on the school's policy. Specific, the extent to which they'll work with you if the kid goes to Africa. If you take your kid out of school, for any reason actually, you send them to a different school, private school, homeschooling, different district, open enrollment, charter school, or Africa, just be sure to let the school know why you're leaving. Because, I mean, number one, that way they won't refer it to the social work or anything if they don't know why the kid is there, not there all of a sudden, even if it's in between years. Okay, so if you're switching your kid from a different school, not if it's within the same district, like you're going from the elementary to the middle school, something like that, the district knows about that. But if you're intentionally taking a kid out of school, sending them to a different district, charter school, whatever, you should let the school know that that is happening, and let them know why, too. Because the schools need to know. It's good when they know that we're leaving their schools, because it puts on their radar that they're not teaching our kids the way we want them to. And that adds to this whole social numbers. Rick?
I know, like, this issue of LGBTQ, a lot of parents who move to charter schools.
Yeah.
A lot of public schools are losing kids. And I think how the school can make staff production. Obviously, we're losing a couple of $1 million, and I'm sure it will be worse.
Yeah.
It's 50.
Yeah.
A lot of people are sleeping out.
Yeah.
So since they see that, their plan.
Well, look, we have to look. We need to point this out to the schools as a thing, okay? Like, they are losing money. The only thing about it is there's not always someone in school districts who's thinking long term about the school districts. Do you get what I'm saying? Okay, the superintendent and the people at the district level, they might be holding that job for a few years until they're going to apply for another job somewhere and just going to move on. Same thing with principals and stuff. That's the only thing about it. Sometimes people in the school districts, they're thinking more about their own career and they are thinking about the long-term health of the school district necessarily. So they're not always keeping an eye out for those things, but there's no doubt that schools do not want enrollment to decrease. So, we need to point out to them when it's happening and talk to them about it. And, continue to talk to school boards. And talk to, it's good to establish a relationship with the principal at your kid's school. Ask to meet them specifically sometime when they can. Principals, they are under professional pressure to make time for that. Principals tend to be people who stretch themselves very thin. They work long hours usually. They will meet with families or have conversations with families. And, you can let them know your concerns, and you can also volunteer too. You can volunteer to offer to, a lot of schools, they like to have parent volunteers, even if it just means like being present in the building sometime. And if you have time to do that, let the school know. They might have a form they want you to fill out or something, but you do that. You can come in and help supervise the kids while they pray or something like this. And then in turn, you establish a relationship with the principal. And you talk to them about what's going on in our community. Because we need them to actually know what goes on in our communities and not pretend like they know. Just to even do that. Any other questions?
I have a question. What would be the biggest challenge Muslim kid faces in school, and how can parents, like limited English, how can they help their child?
Well, it's a really big question. Okay, the biggest challenge that any kid. Hey guys, I want you to listen to this. Okay, I'm being a little looser with making you listen because I know we have the break and stuff. And you've been doing a good job listening. But he asked, "What is the biggest challenge that a Muslim kid has going to school here?" So for you guys, number one, each one of you who is under 18 here, I want you to think about that question. What is the biggest challenge you have at school? And sometimes we need to stop and think. Because in school, we're just rolling and going with the flow of things so much that we don't stop and think about that. You need to stop and think about that. And you need to let your parent know about that. Because I would say the biggest challenge that any kid in America has is peer pressure at school. Okay, talking a little bit about kids' minds and psychology. Young people experience time as going by slower than older people do. Okay? Older people, they remember less than younger people. Because older people, their minds are selective about what they remember. You only remember the stuff that's most important and most crucial. So older people tend to be carrying a lot of wisdom with them. But because they don't hold on to so many memories, older people experience time as going by very fast. Younger people do not experience time that way. Time is moving much slower for them. So for older people, for us, it feels like a month, a year, it goes by like that. Whereas for younger people, they feel like a whole new era in their life has gone by in that same time. So they feel like they are spending a lot of time in school because of that. And it is very, very hard for kids to spend 40 hours a week, 30 to 40 hours a week in school and not care about what other kids think. Because if the other kids start thinking that they're some sort of loser, or they're strange, or something like this, or they're not tough, or whatever, they got to live with that feeling the whole time they're at school. And that doesn't feel good. And most kids will do just about anything to avoid that feeling. So as I was saying before, this whole idea of Islam being a mission for the kids need to have a feeling that they are special, living in this society, and they have to have an idea that it's part of their mission living in this society to give the people dawah eventually. They can do it, and the people do need it. I can't think of anything other than that is going to make the kids feel empowered about upholding this good character. Okay, the other thing is just having a really, really close relationship with parents. Kids growing up in America, you have to really talk to them individually a lot, okay? Most of you guys, you grew up in societies that operated in what anthropologists call a more collective fashion. So it wasn't just mom and dad who parented people, but everyone would parent the kids. Mom and dad could maybe let the kids out of the house, and the neighbors and everyone, they're all going to reinforce the same thing upon the kids. So you don't necessarily need to do like this constant checking in one-on-one with kids and see how they're doing. When people grow up in a society where it's more group-oriented, they are maybe less egotistical. Okay, American kids grow up very egotistical, meaning they think about themselves a lot. And both the media and the learning they'll do in school reinforce that to them a lot. So they will think a lot about their own emotions. And they will become very, very sensitive to it and all this type of stuff. Do you understand what I'm saying? So in that sense, they're like a little bit weaker than people who grew up in the old world. And they don't overcome things as easily. So they need like kind of management on a somewhat day-to-day basis where someone is checking in with them and asking how things are going. And when they're faced with some sort of situation, they need the chance to like talk it out and kind of problem solve around it. Does that make sense? So, it is really good, it's a really good practice to have some sort of structure built into your family where the family comes together at some point every day. Maybe around dinner, maybe around salah, something like that. I know it's not always easy with work and everything, it's not. But you have some sort of time where you come together in the day, and over time you get kids in the habit of that. You have some sort of family time where you come together, and over time you get them into the habit of talking about what's going on in their life as they see it. And that really begins with you talking about what's going on in your life, actually. That's how that's the whole problem parents will run into. You can ask the kid, how was school today? They'll be like, fine. What'd you learn today? I don't know. They'll just give you simple answers like that. It takes time to get them comfortable with talking about it, but kids growing up in this society really need that. Okay, they have all kinds of things going on in their minds. They have all kinds of little things that they're learning about, especially pertaining to what other kids are thinking. And in our community, the big thing is the stuff on social media that kids in our community are doing. And the kids who are doing the stuff that is the most dangerous or the most shocking or whatever, they are getting the most attention on these social media apps. So like kids who are involved in gangs or that type of stuff, or they're pretending that they are, it used to be 10, 15 years ago in this community, there were some kids doing that, but it's like those kids were doing that somewhere and it wasn't most kids, and we could kind of ignore it. Nowadays, the kids who do that type of stuff, they're getting attention from everybody on TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram and so forth. So even the kids who are not involved in it themselves, they still have to know about it. And they still have to be able to talk about it and comment on it to look cool in front of everybody else. You understand what I'm saying? And this whole thing, I'm sure you guys have some awareness, but there's this whole general narrative about Minnesota Somali kids on social media in general. You know what I'm talking about, okay? That is having an extremely damaging effect on the kids overall, even the kids who are being good. Because young people, especially teenagers, they manifest what is projected onto them. So they're constantly seeing on TikTok and Twitter and everywhere, everyone all over the diaspora saying, those Somali Minnesota kids are this, and those Somali Minnesota kids are that. So when kids hear that over and over again, what they eventually say is, yeah, we are. So let's go do that. And then that becomes the thing to do. And that's why it feels like all that stuff is only increasing, because it is. So the people who do all that stuff on social media and talk about the kids that way, they're really not being very helpful. And, we need to talk these things out with kids. Like we have to know what's going on in their lives. And, because otherwise they will hide things from you. Okay, that is what teenagers in America do. They have to at least talk about stuff they should not be talking about amongst their peers in order to look cool, and then they'll lie to their parents about what they're doing and talking about because they don't want the parents to think something bad about them. You understand? So, you have to be trying to check in with kids on a daily basis. And when you do get some honesty from kids, you can't react to it in a shocking way. Do you get what I'm saying? Because that's going to scare them from bringing it up again. You have to try to talk them out and, relate it to the wisdom of the religion. And again, if everything can be brought back to this idea of you're here as a Muslim, being a Muslim doesn't just mean that we do this and we don't do that, but it means that we behave a certain way because we have something to offer people that they need, which is what Islam is. If it can be related to that idea, that way kids can develop a sense of empowerment over the idea of being Muslim. And that's what they need. Okay? Because otherwise they feel like everything about them that's particular to them, being Muslim, being Somali, being the children of immigrants, they just feel like that's something that makes them weird. So then they go about trying to do everything that makes them forget about that when they're in school. And they need to have the sense of of identity that their religion is actually supposed to give them. And you have to make them understand the way that they relate to the non-Muslims to be based on that. And they can develop the confidence to give dawah to the non-Muslims even if you don't do it. That's actually the nice thing about teenagers. Teenagers, they can think about things creatively the way that in different ways than adults can. So even if it's hard for you to imagine how one day your kid's going to be a good example of the non-Muslims here and give them dawah, even if that's hard for you to imagine, you don't have to imagine that for the kid. You just have to encourage him to imagine that himself. And a good thing about teenagers' minds is they do think about things in different ways in this type of thing. That's why sometimes you get these kids like Mark Zuckerberg who, when they're teenagers, they invent something that no one ever even thought of before. Because they kind of think creatively like that. Does it make sense? That was kind of a long answer. But like this type of daily check-in, from what I've learned, certainly about East African culture, and really just a lot of cultures in the Muslim world in general, it's just an important dynamic to understand about how kids grow up here. You have to try to be checking in with them one-on-one a little bit more.
As a parent, what can we do to eliminate social media when kids are at school?
Yeah, okay, really good question, because that's a whole, because it's a really good question, because you said at school, Because, in the UK, the Ministry of Education of Education in the UK, if I understand correctly, they have issued a directive essentially to ban phones in schools. The question for anyone who's in a different room is what to do about kids' access to social media while they're in school. There's plenty of irrefutable research out to show that the kids should not be on screens all day. Having phones at school is detrimental to them. The only reason why schools do not ban phones here is because they don't want to do the work to actually implement it, because they feel overwhelmed by it. But, we have to encourage the schools to ban the phones at school, even in high school. And most schools will say, well, the kids can have it, but they might call their policy bell to bell, no cell, or something like this. Yeah, the kids can have it, but they're not allowed to take it out during class. The kids are taking it out during class. They're sneaking it under the desk, all that type of thing. If the kid brings the phone to school, they're on the phone at school. So, the parent, a lot of school administrators will tell you, they'll say, well, I would ban phones at school, but the parents, too many of them send the phones with the kids. Too many of the parents message the kids at school. And I'm not just saying this about our community, but just about parents in general, So, as adults in the society, we're just failing this generation if we don't get the phones out of their hands. And, we need to try to talk to the schools about it. Now, you can look up, there's a phone, Bark, okay, B-A-R-K, like the sound a dog makes. If you look up Bark cell phone, that is a cell phone that you can get that looks like an iPhone, but all it can do is call and text. It can't do anything else. It can't access the internet or anything. And you can it's only like $40 to get the phone, and then from there, you get a low monthly subscription or whatever. Bark, B-A-R-K. I think that is a really good option. Because the kid can have that, and it's not like a flip phone, so he doesn't look like some sort of loser who doesn't have a phone. The parents can still contact him, but he can't access social media through it. So that's one good option. The only thing in our community, and even teachers, they don't know how to deal with this in schools with Somali kids, because only Somali kids do this. Somali kids, if one kid doesn't have a phone, another kid will give him the phone, tell him his login, and let the kid use his phone. And let him log in on his social... The Somali kids will share phones like that, and no other group of kids do that in the school. And even the teachers in schools, they don't know what to do about that with Somali kids. They're the only kids to do that. So you can get the kid the Bark phone. You can get them a phone that only calls and texts. I think it's a good idea. But they're still going to be able to share it from their friends and that type of stuff, because kids in our community, they do that. Which, it's good that they have that type of comfort with one another, and, they have closer relations other kids grow up with. That's all very good. But and this is what I'm saying, on a day-to-day basis, okay? You need to be checking in with the kids on what's going on in school and all that type of stuff, asking to volunteer at school is a very good thing, okay? Because the kids are living in a way now where they feel like, your eyes are just not there at school, because they're not. It'd be healthy for them to feel their parents' presence a little bit more while they're at school and just feel that they're there. Any other questions?
Your advice to the kids as a Muslim in school here?
My advice to the kids as Muslims in school?
Yeah.
Well, I gave it to them already. I don't know if you're in here when I was beginning talking. But look. Yeah, I know, they might have to come next time, because it won't exactly land the same as what I said before. Timing and things is very important for kids, not to teach them. But for those of you who weren't here in the beginning, actually everyone, if you look up Abraham Education on YouTube, that's my YouTube channel. I am recording the audio here, so I might post the audio of what I said before on my YouTube channel. If you look up Abraham Education, give me a subscribe. You can also look up Abraham_Education on Instagram. But look, for the kids, they need more help from us, and they need to understand their unique place in history, is what they need, because it's a unique opportunity for them to be Muslim in this society, and they should not think Islam is something exclusive to them, because it's not.
It's one question from the Gulf.
Yes.
How far as involved in this or they're wrong?
Say again?
How can fathers involved in this or
The women asked, how can fathers
the role of
be involved in the children? Well, look, when it comes to impacting kids, the Prophet ﷺ, he said that the deeds most beloved to Allah are those that are small, but they are done consistently. So I will tell you, consistency is very important with kids. Okay, kids become connected, they develop a connection with people who are in their lives. Consistency. Kids, especially this generation stuff, they have this anxiety about them because they're unsure of very many things in the world. Consistency provides predictability for kids. So even if a father cannot be in a child's life all the time, and pretty much every father has some restriction over how much he can be in a child's life, because we have to work. I'm not saying the sisters are not working too, of course they are, but that is a challenge that most dads go through. And if you drive a truck and you're out for a long time because of that, that's a challenge. If you're, working in the evenings, it's all a challenge. So be with the kids when you can and just try to make it consistent. Okay? So the kid knows, even if you can't be with the kid every day for whatever reason, if he knows, I'm not going to see Dad Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but I will see him Thursday, Friday, it's predictable, make it consistent. If you have to be on the road or something, you can FaceTime with the kids and just try to do it consistently. Okay, obviously day-to-day consistency, being with the kids is best. But if you can't do that, just whatever you can do, make it consistent. I will tell you guys too, kids, they respond to calmness better than they respond to anger. Okay, kids initially, when they are young, like before they're age 10, 11, if you get angry with them, they'll respond. Because kids at those ages, they want to just please mom and dad, they just want to please adults. They don't want anyone to be upset with them. But once they get a little older and their minds start to expand a little more, adults who are stressed out with them and angry towards them, kids will start to develop an idea of those adults that the adult has something wrong with them. Okay, teachers in school, the teachers who are always stressed with the kids and they act in an agitated way, the kids always leave those teachers' classrooms and they always say, he's crazy or she's crazy. That's what they tell themselves about them. And they will tell themselves the same thing about their parents as they get older if the parents are always dealing with them in an agitated way. So kids, in the long run, they respond to people who have emotional control over themselves very well and deal with them in a very calm fashion. It doesn't mean you deal with them in a loose fashion. It doesn't mean you let them get away with stuff. But you can, discipline a kid. You can talk to them, teach them a lesson with low blood pressure just as much as you can do it with high blood pressure. You just have to calm yourself down before it. And you need to try to talk to kids individually as much as you can. Okay, you need to try to do that. Kids growing up in America need that. They need to have whatever's going on in their mind interrupted on a regular basis. They need to be asked what's going on. They need to be told that they are cared about. Okay, they need to be told that explicitly. Kids growing up in the society, they can become very, very insecure very easily, and that can cause them to behave very different ways. I'll tell you, with our boys, Somali boys in particular, they are actually very, very insecure about themselves in a lot of different ways, and especially in school. Academic success rates are low for Somali boys, according to achievement data. They feel very insecure about their ability to be successful in school. When a kid feels that way in school, emotionally, what they start doing is trying to do anything to avoid school, which usually manifests in misbehaving in school. Because misbehaving in school is a way to distract the whole class from learning and to distract yourself from having to focus on learning because they feel insecure about it and they feel like they can't do it a lot of the time. When they get older, it will manifest in them skipping class and all this type of thing. If you send your child to a school that has a lot of other Somali kids in it, and I've trained teachers who teach Somali boys from all the school districts and all the main charter schools in this state. Most of them are getting through school there is the one kid who gets it in the class, and when the teacher gives an assignment, all the other boys pressure that kid to do the work, and he does it, he shares his answers with everyone else, and everyone copies from him, and then they all turn in the assignment. And the teachers themselves, they don't quite know what to do about this. So we have a lot of kids, the boys especially, who really are not learning that much in school, and they're just passing them through in grades because they don't really hold kids back in grades in our school system in America anymore. I taught at a high school in Minneapolis Public School, 90% Somali kids for 8 years. I cannot tell you how many of those boys showed up in 9th grade and they really could not read or write. The kids who went to school here.
But can that be because when you come here as a new student, let's say when many of them came as a refugee, they have never been to school, and they just think because of their age.
Well, a couple of things on that. The kids who have this academic problem the worst, it's actually the kids who've gone to school here growing up. Because kids who, I've actually had several kids who, if they went to school in the refugee camps, and they came here saying 8th or 9th grade, they actually were reading and writing better than the kids who went to school here. And kids who went to school in Kenya, definitely. And I know that from several other teachers. That's actually the reason to send the kid back to Africa is because they probably actually will just get a better education. Because consistently, kids from Kenya who come in middle school, early high school, their proficiency in reading, writing, and math is better than the kids who grew up here. Like that happens very consistently. So, sometimes the refugee resettlement process, it created an issue in educating the kids when the community first came here because the kids were disorganized and all that type of stuff. So you're correct, like what I'm talking about, it is like a coping mechanism for the kids to get through school. So it's not to say that the kids are bad in that sense, but it's just a problem that's happened. And they have, and the boys especially, they exhibit work avoidance habits in school, which usually entails exhibiting a high level of nuisance behaviors. And the teachers, too, they will struggle to get control of the kids in class, especially when there's a group of boys, because they'll come into the class talking to one another about whatever's going on, whatever they're talking about each other weekend. Because our kids, they're more socially tight-knit than the kids who the school system is used to teaching. Okay, a white kid shows up in school, first day of school, they're looking to make friends. Our kids show up, they already have friends. You understand? So from the very first day of school, they're all talking to one another. And they'll keep talking until the teacher really makes them shut up and listen. Because they'd rather talk than do the work. The white kids, when they look at other kids, they think, I'm competing against that kid to get a better grade than him. Our kids, they might have some sense of that, but they more think like, if you need help, I'm going to show you my answers so that you can get by too. It's more collectivist, you understand? So, and again, this is part of why teachers here need training. They need specific training about how to teach our kids. Because you do need a different bank of skills than most of them have, actually, to teach our kids. So, You know, another thing too, traditionally in schools in America, especially in elementary school, it's kind of expected that parents are going to help a lot with the homework. And that's maybe changed as there's been more children of immigrants in the school system. But, like, I would say that's something that having a large amount of kids with parents who don't speak English, or maybe with mothers who have limited education, that is something that kind of shocked the school system here over the past 20 years. And they didn't know what to deal with it. Because it's always kind of expected under the neighborhood school system that America has, that the teacher's going to teach the lesson, but if the kid doesn't get it, well, they'll send the homework assignment home and the books home, and then mom will reteach it to the kid at home, and mom will make sure he gets it. Do you understand what I'm saying? The school system kind of got by on that for a long time. So they've never really, the schools around here, they've never learned how to teach our kids well. And again, going back to it, the boys, they feel insecure about it. They feel insecure about it. And they will never admit that they feel insecure about it. Well, they might if you get to make them comfortable talking to you. But because they feel insecure about that, their friendships with one another just becomes that much more important. Because in their friendships with one another, they can set up a world with one another where they can feel successful. But it's success based on whatever teenagers say is successful, which is mostly stuff we don't want them to do. You get what I'm saying? So like our kids, this whole social world that they have, they're very emotionally attached to it, for the most part.
Have there been any study or data comparing boys to the girls? And what is working for the girls that's not working for the boys?
Yeah, so the achievement data in Minnesota, and it's similar in Washington too, you can filter it by home language. So you can look at just the achievement data of the kids who either Somali has been identified as home language for them or their parents. So you can look at achievement data specifically for Somali kids, and then from there you can filter it by gender as well. So the girls are doing better than the boys. Now, why the girls are doing better? First of all, success rates in schools in general in America, if you look at any honor roll, an honor roll in the average high school, of any high school, is going to be 60% girls and 40% boys. So girls just in general are doing better academically in school than boys. There's a lot of different theories as to why that is. It's probably the case that the learning that is done in the style of education is more suitable for girls, especially in elementary school, because 90% of elementary school teachers are female. Girls do mature faster than boys. Especially, they develop abstract thinking sooner than boys. So I taught 4th grade for 5 years. You go into any 4th grade classroom, what they do these days is they will give the kid an assessment to check their reading level. And then they will teach them in small groups based on their level, and you might have 4 groups in a class. You go to any 4th grade classroom, the high level is going to be all girls. The high reading level. And maybe one boy, and the low level is going to be all boys, maybe one girl. And probably same with the 3rd level and this type of stuff. And that's because girls develop abstract thinking before boys do, and that's a main skill that you need for reading comprehension. So that's the whole thing, even just from there, boys start to get the idea of themselves, an impression that they're not good in school. Now, there's a sociologist at the University of Minnesota, a Somali lady, her name is Awal Abedi. You ever heard of her? Yeah, she wrote a book called Elusive Jannah that studied the refugee situation of Somalis in Minnesota, South Africa, and the United Arab Emirates and compared them to one another. And I've had a few conversations with her in my life. Her theory is that because the culture generally is more protective over girls, that the girls submit better to the structure of school than the boys do. So her theory is like when the community came here, the culture with the boys is once they get to be like 10, 11, 12, or maybe teenagers, you let them kind of go free and all this type of stuff. They have more freedom, whereas the girls are kept home and more protective. The girls, the structure that school tries to put onto them, the girls resist it less. And they're more ready to give into it. And whereas the boys, it's harder for the schools to put structure upon them because they resist it more. And just in general, girls in general, they're more compliant. They're more motivated by compliance than boys are. Just in general. And being compliant is correlated with being successful in school. So there's a few different things like that, I would say. All the kids, there's really a problem emerging in the community of the girls acting like boys. And that is something that happens in teenage culture. And especially with this whole social media stuff going on, the boys doing dangerous stuff are getting the most attention. But the girls are paying attention to it too. And they feel pressured. Like if you go to one of our schools, the girls, they don't call each other sister at school. They call each other bro. You understand what I'm saying? Because they imitate the behaviors of the boys who are getting all the attention. And there's also a thing that can develop psychologically with girls when they get into middle and early high school, that they want the attention of boys to some degree. And what their minds calculate is the way to get attention from boys is to act like them. So this is part of what causes young teenage girls in America to start getting these more kind of masculine traits. You know what I'm saying? They used to do back in the day here, way back in the day, like in my grandmother's generation, they used to have manners schools for girls. And then they used to have men's clubs with programs for boys, that type of stuff. To the extent that we can, we should do explicit education that is separate for boys and girls in our community. And give the girls really explicit instruction on what it means to be a girl and how a woman is supposed to act and that type of stuff. Because otherwise they're just imitating what they see in different places. So that problem's emerging a little bit. But overall, that's what I would say is schools really notice the difference with our kids between the genders. They really notice that the girls are doing much better than the boys. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وأتوب إليك.